All right, cool. Belonging to something beyond yourself is important for happiness. Have the courage to belong to nothing and everything at the same time. Wow, that's some abstract shit right there, isn't
This
it?
is deep. This is this is a deep one here. Let's see if you, is there anything that comes to mind when you read something like that? Like even like a slightest hint of
So
what that could mean?
the first half I can definitely get on board with, right? Um, the first half I think is quite easily explained away, and especially like human beings are very social animals, and we need to belong to part of groups and
Yeah.
societies and yada yada yada. That's basically mandatory for humans. That's wired into our brains. Having the courage to belong to nothing and everything at the same time, though, oh god, I feel like I'm in one of them weird solver spots with like six combos.
This is a very spiritual kind of deep.
And that's my weakness. You know that's my weakness as well. No, you're gonna have to take the wheel here.
Yeah, this is a weird one too. Like I didn't really understand it. I had to really think about this when I first read it in the book when what she was talking about, and she kind of explained it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't know what the hell this meant either. I'm sure like everyone watching this, like oh, maybe Oscar is like Alan Watts.
This is
He
some
knows.
serious Alan Watts shit right here, isn't it? It
Have the
really is.
courage to belong to nothing and everything at the same time. So what this is basically saying is, let's say, for example, Scott, Mr. Pullington there, he belongs to Team 651. He belongs to his family, his kids, whatever, his family, like his social life. So you belong to all these different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are all part of you, but at the same time, you're your own person as well, and you kind of attach to those situations, you live in those situations, but you can easily detach yourself as well, so those things don't have emotional power over you as a being. So this is a very deep thing, and like I promise anybody who's watching this will understand if they just take the time to understand it. So have the courage to belong to nothing and everything at the same time. So belong to everything. Go ahead and do your thing. Be a part of Team 651. Be a part of your family. Be a part of your friends. Be a part of the gym that you go to, the community at the gym. But also at the same time, realize that you belong to nothing simultaneously. So you're there, but you're not so attached to it because you're your own person and you have that boundary
Mm-hmm.
that nothing can kind of, cross that emotional kind of boundary that you have. So it's like it's essentially being attached
Yeah.
and detached at the same time. If that makes any sense, does that make any sense to you, Scott? When I say that,
Yeah, I get
I
it.
mean,
I mean,
it's so resistant.
I do no, I do get it. You know, I'm like as soon as things start getting spiritual, I struggle with it. But I do get what it's saying. Like the idea of belonging to something is an abstract concept anyway. Like it's man made. It doesn't exist. Like being part of a club, like yeah, sure, you sign up, you pay your membership, you're a part of the club, but you're only part of the club. It's not. There's no physical being part of a club now, is there? You know, it's not.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like here's another way of saying it. So maybe you'll understand like what I mean when I say this. It's like okay, so it's like you belong to something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever this something is, could be anything. You can live with it and without it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you can live with it and you can live without it. So you belong to it, but at the same time, you know that this thing, there's no attachment there. Like this thing is like it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So you love it being part of your life, but you can easily
Yeah, I
just
understand.
be your own person as well. Like this is like complete detachment, Alan Watts, Oscars kind of situation here.
Yeah.
Um, and not a lot of people are going to resonate with this, especially if you're somebody that doesn't like spirituality or you don't do a lot of spiritual work. or if you kind of have such an attachment that you don't want to let go of the attachment, there's
Yeah.
going to be resistance towards hearing something like this. You're
Yeah.
like, no, what do you mean? Like, this is a part of me. This is who I am. Nothing is who you are,
Yeah.
right? Nothing is actually who you are. Like, we take all these little bits and you're like, this is my identity. My identity is my family. My identity is, Team 651, my identity. You become overly attached. What happens is, whether it be a place, whether it be a community, that thing is now in control and has power over your emotions. Okay. So that means that thing, or whatever something it is, has the power to make you feel really good, which also means it has the power to make you feel really bad. So this is saying belong to those things, but also they don't belong to anything. You're in your own space. You have that boundary. You're your own person. And that's essentially it. So you can live with it or you can live without it. You don't have any emotional or energetic attachment to this certain something. It's not like you're going to die without it. It's not like you're going to suffer without it. You're like, oh, this is cool. I'm a part of this, but I can easily not be a part of this as well. And I'm going to be completely fine either way. Okay. So let's go to this last one here.
Last point. You're only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. Um, yeah, very Alan Wattsy. So it's. I mean, this one to me just says like you're a part of the earth, but not any specific part of it. You're not absolutely attached to the place that you live. Like you're going to be you no matter where on this earth you are. And so you need to kind of detach from that, which I think is important when you consider that you could be displaced at any minute for any given reason. You could be fucking thrown in jail for a crime you didn't commit, and then you're stuck there for 20 years. And if you're overly attached to being in a certain place, that obviously again has control over you. So it's kind of like the same thing as the belonging, right? It's like that your area effectively has control over you. You being a prime example, Mr. Living in America, playing poker for a living, everything's fine. Then one day the Department of Justice decides that your game's illegal and now you have to live in Canada. And if you decided, no, I belong in New York or I belong in Florida, then you would obviously have had to sacrifice a very profitable and enjoyable career just because simply you were so attached to the place that you were in, which is pretty suboptimal. So that's what I'm taking from that.
You're very literal with that. Like that's a good example of it, but it's like literally like the
Don't
place.
go spiritual on me. You always do this,
Yeah,
chap.
it's like the spiritual stuff. I mean, the spiritual stuff is a bit like it's a bit weird because it's a bit like woo wah wah, like up in the air kind of stuff. It's not one thing of what she meant here,
Okay.
but it's not like when she writes it this way, like it doesn't mean like a literal place.
Okay. She didn't mean
It could
Florida.
be like an emotion, like it doesn't have to necessarily mean Florida. It could mean that, but it could also be like an emotional place,
Okay.
that you're in, or like um, any place that you belong to. Like a place could be like in this like sentence, it could mean like a place could mean your family.
Okay.
A place can mean your gym, whatever it is, like the place, an emotional place, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you're only free when you realize you belong no place, which it's almost saying this last one is almost in a more spiritual, like weird kind of way. It's almost saying the same thing as have the courage to belong to nothing and everything at the same time.
Okay.
So it means like you're only free when you realize that you can take apart in all these things. You can take a part of your favorite soccer team. You can
Yeah.
take a part of your favorite football team. You can take a part in your social activities, your community, fundraisers, whatever it is. But you don't belong anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But you belong everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So you can live with it and you can easily live without. It's going back to the same kind of concept with like attaching and detaching, right?
Yeah.
And this is a very spiritual thing. I would say like at least like probably 90 to 95% of people that are listening to this are going to might be a little bit confused by what we're saying here. It's totally natural to feel confused at this because this is not like very practical, literal stuff. This is just like very up in the air, like Alan Watts kind of, random shit. So if someone watches this,
just do it, Jack. It's a fugazi. It's a fugazi.
so if someone's watching this and you're like completely confused, Oscars is probably like nodding his head, yeah, I get everything, I know
Yeah.
it. But like if you're watching this and you feel a little bit confused or a little bit lost, it's pretty natural to feel that way. This is like that's what I was saying. Like this book started slow, but then it went kind of deep. This goes really deep, um, and it's just when you read this, it just looks really weird when you read it.
Yeah.
Um, but the reason why I know what she's talking about is because obviously she explains it in the book after she says this, and then she sees, this is what I mean. Like you're
Yeah.
kind of, in this position where you realize that you belong every place, which means you're part of everything. You're part of the community. You're part of whatever programs you're in, whatever it is. You belong there, but you also don't belong anywhere. You're your own person. You have your boundary of your emotional boundary. Nothing has complete control over you. You can lose a certain something. You're not going to die. Nothing's going to happen. Um, so that's what it's kind of getting at here.
Okay.
So it's very Alan Wattsy, very spiritual. The good news is the next book that we're going to do a podcast on is actually extremely practical, pure practicalities, no spiritual
What
stuff
is
at
it?
all. It's called Essentialism. This is the book.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
it's actually it was actually a pretty damn good read. We're gonna get into
Tomo's
that.
Tomo's gonna fucking love this. Wobble Pig talking about a book. What Tomo's gonna love me talking about a book called Essentialism.
Essential. Oh yeah,
Essentially,
yeah.
essentially. I had to cut that word directly out of my vocabulary because Joe made a song about it and Tom wouldn't stop mocking me for it. It's gone. It's.
Probably got well essentialism. You might say it once
I'm
in our
gonna
next
avoid it. I'm
podcast.
not even gonna
Let's just do
fucking.
like
Yeah.
let's just do like a complete wrap up of this one here. So
Okay.
um, just looking back at everything here, braving the wilderness. So just the book title, Braving the Wilderness, is kind
Hmm.
of interesting. Basically, what I get from like just listening to that, Braving the Wilderness, it's like having the courage to go out into things that are very uncertain and you don't know what's going to happen and you're vulnerable, but
Yeah.
you have the courage to do that. But you also have the courage to realize that yes, you fit into all these different groups, and
Hmm.
yes, you should belong to all these different groups, but don't be married to those groups and those things, and don't be so attached to the idea of them, and don't let them be in control of your emotions. So you can easily detach from that and
Yeah.
realize that you're your own person, right? And you have your own emotions, and nobody is able to have complete power over that, right?
Yeah.
And so you're there, you're there, you're with them, you're spending time with them, but you can also disconnect as well and do your own thing, and you're happy either way, this
Yeah.
way, that way, it's all good.
Just quickly, if like to me, it feels like this book could have been called like "Embrace the Uncertainty," right?
Yeah, it's
It
essentially like a fancy way, braving the wilderness is like a fancy way of saying
yeah.
embrace the uncertainty.
Just quickly on that note, like for anyone out there who feels like this, I'm someone I struggle with uncertainty big time. It's something that like I've had to work on over the years, and particularly during the pandemic. And any of you guys, I'm sure everyone's seen the TV adverts. You guys probably have the commercials, Jack, where they're like, during these uncertain times, right? You, you know, where they're trying to fucking capitalize on the
Yeah,
us
yeah,
not knowing when we're going to go outside again. Um, I actually did some reading during the pandemic about it because I do suffer with uncertainty, and there's a study where um, they took a group of participants and they told them that they might get an electric shock, right?
yeah.
And then they had like a zapper and they would sometimes give them an electric shock. And then they took another group and they told them that this group were definitely going to get an electric shock, and they got zapped. The people
Yeah.
who didn't know suffered far greater anxiety and their like heart rates were more elevated than the group who knew they were getting the electric shock. So it's humans are far better off knowing that they're about to experience something terrible than anticipating it and not knowing what the outcome's going to be. Kind of like with a bad diagnosis, or like uh, a much easier one we talked about this already. When you fire off your stack on the river, right? and you have to wait 10 minutes while your opponent is in the tank, right? Let's say 50% of the time they're going to call and you're busto. And 50% of the time they're going to fold and you win a huge pot, right? Well, the whole point we were saying there for people who don't follow where I'm going here is that if you don't embrace the uncertainty, you will check and lose the pot 100% of the time, right? You're going to lose the pot every single time you check. And if you really cannot make your peace with uncertainty, you will check and you will make less profitable plays just so you don't have to cope with the uncertainty. Even though there's a 50-50 chance, realistically, it's like 70-30 chance of a good outcome in many situations, you cannot cope with the time where you don't know what's going to happen next. Okay, so embracing uncertainty is not something that's easy. I'm speaking from experience here. It's something that I definitely had to work on, and that's what I use stoicism for. Is, like not worrying about things, like getting headaches and not worrying that you're about to die. Like things with pets. For me, it would be like having to, for example, Jack, take my cat to the vets, right? And they do a blood test. They're like, we're not sure what's wrong with the cat. We'll do a blood test. It's going to take 2 weeks for the results.
Yeah.
Wobble Pig in 2017 is going to spend 2 weeks just stressing non-stop about that, right? He's like, I'm just gonna lose hours every day worrying about the outcome of the blood test. But I'd like to think Wobble Pig in 2021 is going to do a very small amount of worrying and then a lot of injecting of logic, where I'm like, hey, listen, man, the result is going to be what it's going to be, and losing a whole day is not going to change the outcome. And you don't have any requirement to feel sad or stressed in the meantime. If I go on and live my life happily over those 2 weeks, it doesn't make my cat any more or less likely to survive,
Yeah, nothing. I mean, nothing. You can worry all you want. Nothing's going to change the results of the test. You can drive yourself miserable if you want to, but what's the point? What's the point in doing that? It's just you're just wasting your own energy and like.
If I'm going to get bad news, I'll deal with it then. But there's no point in spending 2 weeks mourning it when it's like a 50-50. It could be good. It could be. I mean, 90% of the time with situations like that, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, that zapping thing you mentioned was kind of interesting though. Because it's funny, it's more plus EV to not be sure if you're going to get zapped or not.
Yeah.
Because if they tell you you're going to be zapped 100% of the time, you're just getting zapped 100% of the time.
You're getting
the other
stacked.
Guy, maybe like 50-50.
Yeah.
But then like they're thinking about it and like there's resistance there. So they're not accepting their fate. There's resistance there because the people that are getting zapped are accepting their fate. They come to peace with it. Like, okay, I'm getting zapped. That's my mindset. I've accepted it.
Yep.
The other people, they're not sure. So there's like resistance. They're like, wait, am I going to get zapped? Maybe I don't get zapped. Maybe I do get zapped. And they start overthinking, overanalyzing.
That's right.
A replay going off their mind. And like it drives them crazy and it builds anxiety. And, but that's crazy. Like humans are not GTO naturally. You have to train yourself to think more GTO in terms of human things. Like there's so many human biases. Like we're just very un-GTO in a natural way.
Yeah.
And like you get more GTO as you start reading books, as you start understanding how the human mind works.
Yeah.
So you can understand like how to interject when you're being completely irrational about something.
Yeah.
And that's a really important skill in life. So
yeah,
that's why we do these podcasts. Like everyone's playing poker, playing poker is all good and dandy and like studying poker is all great too, but you really want to study your own brain too. And when I say your own brain, I don't necessarily mean like only mental game just on poker. Everyone should really be studying mental game on their life. How to feel better emotions on a daily basis. That brings a lot of value to your life. Like, there's a saying, before we wrap this up, there's a saying, not from this book, but this is just a random saying, that the quality of your life is the quality of the emotions you feel on a daily basis, like the quality of the dominant emotions you feel on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So if you're feeling good emotions generally on a daily basis, you're going to have a better quality of life than somebody that's, let's say, for example, being anxious and worried for 2 weeks because his cat, has a blood test that's coming in. That affects the quality of your life, like in a big way. If you're not able to understand your emotions, be aware of your emotions, and like kind of diffuse them, let's call it, sometimes, like, we all get into those habits. I get into habits. Sometimes I'm worrying about shit, and I have to stop myself. I'm like, wait a second, what the hell am I worrying about this crap for?
Yeah.
I have no, like, this worry is not going to change any outcome. There's nothing that's going to happen, and like you just kind of almost like slap yourself a little bit and wake up, and you're like, okay, let me just let me calm down. There's not really any reason um, for me to waste energy and live miserably for this next few hours or for the next few days or whatever. So it's really about being aware of that and like seeing when you are kind of going through those like downward spirals, let's call them, and just kind of lifting yourself, out of that, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess let's wrap up here, unless you got some final words, Scotty, and then
No, sounds
we'll
good to me,
change our
mate.
shirts.
That's it.
Scotty will turn his hat backwards in a second. And